Well, hello, friends, and welcome. My name is Doug Bouws with Canopy, and I am your host for this webinar today, How to Find and Tell Stories That Create Connections and Drive Results. And we have a special guest with us today, Daniel Jenkins, president of StoryFind. I'm guessing you know and are quite aware that stories matter in the fundraising space because stories motivate and stories inspire. In fact, I bet most of us have probably tried to tell hundreds, maybe thousands of stories in our life. Some of them go great, some of them not so much. We're going to talk about all that today. Finding great stories, finding people willing to tell their story, sharing stories in a compelling way that honor the storyteller. We know it can be difficult and sometimes even delicate, but we want to talk about that, and we're glad you're here. At Canopy, we believe stories too are important because stories in the legacy conversation, it's important for people to both see themselves in the story, to be able to consider a legacy gift themselves. So we're going to explore that and a lot more today. I'm so glad you're here with us. A word about Canopy. Formerly, we were known as Money for Ministry up until May of this year. We've served faith-based organizations from the evangelical, Protestant mainline, and Roman Catholic traditions since 2003. We're also excited to be able to welcome a growing number of what we call values-based nonprofits in a wide range of sectors, including colleges and universities, animal welfare, hospice organizations, food banks, affordable housing, and many others. We're a planned giving growth company, and we have a vision to unlock the power of legacy giving by cultivating vibrant donor relationships. I think stories are a big part of vibrant donor relationships. But in real practical terms, I think sometimes we like to say we want every family to have a will. We hope every will has a gift to a charity in it, and we hope every charity has a sustainable future. Since our founding, we've helped nonprofits add well over $1.5 billion to their legacy pipeline. We're glad you're here as folks continue to log on. Just a few items of housekeeping, few items of interest, some housekeeping details to be aware of. There are two buttons at the bottom of your screen. One is called a chat button. If you click that, you should open up a window. It's a great place for you to engage with others who are on the call today as we go. I'd love to get some chatter going right now. Here's my question. This weekend, it's Labor Day weekend. We celebrate the American worker. For some of us, many of us, maybe it's a time to do one last summary kind of thing before we head into fall. So I'm curious, what are your plans? Maybe you're just staying home, and that's great. But maybe you're going camping, or you're hanging out with friends, or you're doing a project around the house, or you're moving a kid into college. Just write a couple words in the chat window. We'd love to get to know each other and see what we're up to here with this long weekend coming up. And then there is a question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question you want answered today, either from myself or from Daniel, put your question in that question and answer box. We have set aside 15 to 20 minutes at the end of our time. Sometimes this is some of the best learning we have together. So we're looking forward to your questions. We'll answer as many as we can live. One other item of housekeeping details. Yes, the webinar is being recorded. And a recording will be made available after the call to anyone who registered. So if you couldn't make it at this exact time, or you have friends and colleagues you want to share it with, we hope you will do so. It's really great to see what's going on here. We got bike races, people going golfing, a chilly day on the beach, perhaps, watch some college football, more golfing. So it looks like everyone's in for a great weekend. Somebody has a birthday to celebrate, a 61st wedding anniversary. Amazing. All right. Well, good. Well, I want to welcome our guest today, Daniel Jenkins. Daniel brings over 20 years of experience in the nonprofit and organizational leadership space to his role as president of StoryFind. Daniel's background is rich in strategic planning, direct mail fundraising, grant writing, major gifts, and comprehensive campaign management. He has an MBA and an MS in organizational leadership and a proven track record of helping organizations and teams grow and find success, especially in the nonprofit world. He's also actively involved in volunteer leadership, serves on the board of directors for Concordia Center for the Family and the alumni board of directors at Concordia University of Irvine. Daniel, welcome. We are so glad to have you with us today. I'm so glad to have you share your expertise, your knowledge, your wisdom. In the short time that we've had to get to know each other, I just think you're full of all of that wisdom, guidance, experience, vision, captured in a truly humble and generous person. So, again, thank you. We're glad you're here. I know you're going to talk to us for a little bit about what makes a great story. Then we're going to workshop a couple of them together. And then we have a StoryFind master plan, which is a gift to those who you can stay. If you're here at the end, you have an opportunity to request that. We're looking forward to sharing that with you. And then, of course, we have some Q&A. So all that and more today. That's a lot to cover. So let's dive in. And Daniel, I think you're going to get us started here.
Well, thank you, Doug. It's great to be here. I have to say that's the kindest way anybody's ever told me I'm full of it. So I really, really appreciate that. So yeah, let's get started about talking about storytelling. And so want to make sure, Doug, my screen's showing up okay?
Yes, it looks great. Thank you.
Perfect. All right.
Excellent.
So, if we're going to talk about storytelling, I want to be able to share an example. And as Doug mentioned, my background is 15 plus years of nonprofit fundraising and executive leadership. So I've been in that role of needing to tell stories. And this particular one is probably the most successful appeal I ever had in my career. And it started one day when I was sitting in my office and received a phone call from a lady whose name I cannot to this day remember, unfortunately, but she was the mother of a 10-year-old girl, Samantha. And you see, Samantha had been born blind. And growing up, this was a family who was very devout in their faith. They were at church every Sunday. They were at church on Wednesday nights. They were at Bible study. And so Samantha would go to church and she would go to Sunday school. And growing up, she just had to listen as everybody got to read the Bible. She was always there. She participated, but she could only listen. And starting about the age of 6, when she began to learn Braille, she kept asking her parents if she could have a Braille Bible for herself. So every birthday, every Christmas, she would ask, Mama, can I get a Braille Bible? And Santa bring me a Braille Bible. And when her parents went to find one, what they found out is that the starting cost for one Braille Bible in English is over $800. And honestly, the cost can actually go into thousands of dollars for one Bible. And this family just simply couldn't afford it. And so every birthday and every Christmas, they had to see the disappointment on her face because she couldn't get a Braille Bible. And one day, the mom was connected to the organization I worked with, Lutheran Braille Workers. And she went to the website and she saw that, hey, you can order a Braille Bible for free. And she thought it was too good to be true. But she also said, hey, there's no credit card information I have to fill out. Let me at least try. And so she filled out the form, submitted it, and that was it. She didn't hear anything until 4 weeks later. This box arrived on their front doorstep, and they opened it up, and it was the four Gospels in Braille. You see, a Braille Bible in English is actually 37 volumes. It's 5.5 feet in shelf space for one Bible. And it just so happened that the Gospels arrived the week of Easter. And so Samantha that Sunday got dressed up in her Easter dress and she went to Sunday school. And 10 years old, for the first time in her life, she was able to read the Easter story to the other kids instead of having to always have them read to her. And in church that day, she was able to follow along as the pastor was talking, and she was able to read the Bible alongside him. And when they got in the car to go home, Samantha's mom said she was so over the top excited. She had to ask, "Why are you so excited?" And the mom thought maybe it was the Easter egg hunt or the candy or the basket she got, and it wasn't. You see, Samantha turned to her mom and said, "Oh, mom, all of these years, whenever I heard people talk about the Easter story, I thought it was for everybody else except me. And today, when I got to read it, I realized Jesus died for me too, and I'm going to be with him one day. Oh, mama, isn't Easter amazing?" And within that appeal, it was such a simple appeal because I literally asked people, will you make a gift today so that the 338 million other people worldwide who are legally to fully blind can know that Easter is for them too? Best appeal I ever wrote. Greatest response rate, greatest number of gifts, greatest total gift dollar, highest ROI, led to volunteers coming on board the organization, led to a six-figure major gift, actually. That's the power of story. And I share Samantha's story because as we go through the rest of this, that's going to be what I'm referencing as we continue along. And so I always like to start, I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, start with why, right? Why do we tell stories? We often hear it's so important. Why? Why is it important? First and foremost, stories are remembered up to 22 times better than facts. So when you're working with donors, keep in mind you're in the midst of a sea of noise, so to say. I think the most recent data I saw, people receive on average 14 requests for funding per week. If you're with a faith-based Christian organization, that number goes up over 20. And so if you want people to remember you, is it going to be through a list of your organizational data points or is it telling stories? Well, it's going to be through stories. We know that for a fact. That's how people will remember you. This was a huge one. I mean, when I read this study in Forbes, I was blown away because this speaks to generational shifts in giving patterns. So constituents are over 2,700% more likely to support company if they like the brand's story. Not the brand anymore. It has to be the brand's story. And I think back to my grandparents. If you had Lutheran in your name, they would write you a check. The brand is all that mattered. Well, guess what? That doesn't happen anymore. People are looking to know why you exist and they want to know what you're doing. And so you have to be able to share that story with them if you want to get that support. And then we know from a fundraising perspective, 79% of donors say they are more likely to donate after hearing an emotional story. And ultimately, what it comes down to, quite frankly, is scientifically, our brains are actually designed to most efficiently and effectively process information via story. That's literally how we're wired, is to be able to communicate through story. And so if we're not telling stories, we're not reaching donors where their brains are literally at for most people. And so if we understand why we need to tell stories, I think the next step actually becomes what stories are not, right? So I want to be very clear what stories aren't. It's not a mission statement. And I think we want to make our mission statement our story because we understand it within the organization, but that's insider language. It's not a story. And if you're expecting a donor to remember your mission statement, good luck. That's not going to happen most of the time. You could have the world's greatest mission statement, but that's not what's going to be memorable for people. So your mission statement isn't a story. It's not a collection of facts or data points. Again, our brains aren't designed to remember a ton of data. It's not easy. It's not a normal way for most people. I want to be clear, most people to be able to remember that information. So sharing that with people, you're not telling a story. And it's not taglines. It's not that pithy little phrase. It's not the thing that we want to hit with all of our marketing. And don't get me wrong, there is a purpose for all of those, but that's not a story. And so if we look at what stories are not, I think it's really important, right? Well, what is a story? And first and foremost, it's narrative. It's the same way when I told Samantha's story, right? It was a narrative. There was a flow to this. It wasn't just bullet points. So when we talk about storytelling, there is a narrative base for it. There has to be sympathetic characters. In that particular case, I know it's really easy to think of Samantha as being the sympathetic character, but in all reality, knowing my donor audience at that time, I actually pointed to Samantha's parents as the sympathetic characters, right? Because I think for most of us who have children, we can't even understand, we can't even begin to understand telling our child, no, I can't get you a Bible, and seeing that disappointment on their face at Christmas and at the birthday. Like, this is a little girl not asking for toys or clothes or money. She's asking for a Bible, right? So the sympathetic character is, yes, Samantha, but it's also the parents. There's a relatable theme. And this is a little weird to say. Relatable theme can go in two ways. It's either something we can understand and align with because we've experienced it, but it's also can be relatable in the sense of we can't even fathom it. It's something that we can't even begin to process because it's just so foreign to us. There has to be a theme that hooks people, that connects people to their heart. They have to be able to either picture it or see themselves within it. And ultimately, there needs to be one clear takeaway. So it's not a story if you end with five different paths that, okay, now to write your own journey, right? That's not a story. It's not even an effective story. It's not even a story at all. There has to be one clear takeaway to be a story. And so what is also a story, or what is contained within a story, is what we call story arc. And there's a lot of different ways to tell stories. You have the hero's journey. I mean, you look it up on Google, there's 15 different answers. But what I can tell you from experience, and this is 20 years of experience of StoryFind as a company, but also my background and experience, is that if literally every organization could at least capture this most fundamental story arc, your stories will be more effective and I guarantee you will see improved results. Because again, our brains are wired to at least process and consider information in this general flow. So a fundamental story arc is just this. You have a challenge. What is the problem being overcome? In Samantha's story, what was the challenge, right? Well, she was born blind. That was the challenge. It's something that we can't reverse that, but that's the starting point. The struggles were she didn't have a Braille Bible. The family couldn't afford one because it was so expensive. They didn't know where to turn. She was disappointed, but we also found out later, right, that there was another struggle. She didn't think that Easter was for her. She thought it was for everybody else. And what was the resolution? Well, really there were two resolutions, right? The basic resolution was she got a Bible. And we could have ended the story there, but the true resolution, the transformational resolution was she realized that Easter was for her. She was going to be with Jesus someday. And so when we talk even about storytelling, you look at the resolution, um, so often we want to either avoid the struggle or we want to get to the resolution too quickly, but the struggle is part of the story and the resolution can't be surface level. You have to look for that transformational resolution because that's where donors see themselves as part of. That's what you're inviting them to participate within. Now, the other hard part about nonprofits, what is so different in the nonprofit world from the sales world, which I don't think a lot of people who've not been in the nonprofit world understand, what makes fundraising so much more difficult is you're not providing a tangible benefit. When you ask people for their money, they receive an intangible benefit, an intrinsic benefit, right? They feel better, they feel good, they feel they're contributing, they feel they're honoring God's call, whatever we want to describe. There's nothing tangible that they're holding on to. And so when you're making an appeal, when you're asking people to either give or do something, you're actually making an argument. You're asking them why you stand out from the 13 to 19 other appeals that they're receiving that week, right? You have to make an argument. And when you're looking to make a successful argument, there's actually a device we recommend that you use to have a successful argument. And literally, this is coming from Aristotle. This has been around for over 2,000 years, and it works. And that rhetorical triangle is this. And I always hold up my hands in that triangle, but you start at the top with the ethos. There's an ethics and a credibility to your organization that tells donors you are going to do what you say you're going to do. If they give you money, you're going to use it the right way, and you know how to use it the right way. If you think about Samantha's story, as I described it, it doesn't seem at first glance that there was an ethos component, right? Where was the authority? Well, it was very subtle, but it was there. Samantha's mom ordered a Bible. 4 weeks later, it showed up. That's the ethos. It's an implication that we delivered what she wanted and what we said we were going to deliver. So you notice it doesn't have to be overt. You don't have to build 2 paragraphs about your organization's history. In fact, that's the worst thing to do because now you're taking it away from donor-centric language to organization-centric language, right? But you have to, within that story, convey the trustworthiness and authority to who you are. The next component is the pathos. This is the emotional component. It was clear, right? We all felt for Samantha. We all felt for Samantha's parents. We understood that emotional impact. We felt a personal connection. But sometimes organizations miss this part. It doesn't have to be, by the way, crying. Emotion doesn't have to be to make people cry. In fact, when we described Samantha's emotional state, she was overjoyed, right? It wasn't her crying, it was her feeling overjoyed. So emotional connection has to be included, but it doesn't always have to be about making people cry. It's about making people feel. And then that final component, the logos. And this is where organizations often really when I look at appeals or stories that don't work, this is often the most missing piece. It's that data, the logic, the reason that justifies it. This is so critical because the logos is what in the donor minds takes this from an anecdotal story to saying that this is a real problem that I need to be a part of the solution. And again, if you look at Samantha's story, there was data built in, right? We talked about the cost of a Bible being $800 starting cost, maybe thousands. We talked about the size of the Bible, 37 volumes, 5.5 shelves, feet in shelf space. And then at the end, we talked about there's 338 other million other people who are legally to fully blind. That was it. It was 3 data points wrapped into the story. It wasn't a list of data, but the data was there so that psychologically the donor understood there is evidence that this is a problem that needs to still be addressed. And there is a great book I highly recommend that really gets into this. It's called Switch. It's by Chip and Dan Heath. And within the book, they describe that in our brains, we have a rider and an elephant. We like to think of ourselves as logical creatures. We're not. The elephant is the biggest part of our brain. It's the emotional response. It's we want to feel good. It's I want to eat ice cream for dinner, or I don't want to go to work tomorrow. I want to sit in a hammock and read one of these many books around me, right? It's that emotional I want to do what feels good. But there's also that rider, and that is the logical part of our brain. And it's trying to control and direct and guide that elephant. It's saying, no, 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 we got to eat vegetables. We have to be healthy. No, 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 you have to go to work because we have to pay the bills. But it's an exhausting fight throughout the day. That rider and the elephant are often fighting all day long. And what happens is when you present an appeal to a donor, if you only focus on the emotional component, that writer might be fighting because maybe, again, if they read 6 appeals in 2 days, they're thinking about another organization. Hey, they seem like they do actually a more effective job. I get the emotional, but it's trying to fight the elephant. So what happens is when you utilize that rhetorical triangle and really combine that emotional and data, what happens is you get an elephant wanting to charge down the path you presented to them. This is how you support us. And the riders is sitting on top of the elephant going, "Go ahead. Have fun. Let's go." That's where you get your immediate response, your greatest response, and you also avoid a real problem, which is donor remorse or donor regret, where they're like, should I really have made that gift? Or should I really have left that large of a portion of my estate to this organization? You avoid it because your brain is now in alignment. One final thought, because I keep referencing don't include data as lists. So, really quickly, what makes data effective in stories? Well, first and foremost, you want what is called pattern interruption. You want people to have to stop and go, wait, what? You want that which is unexpected or memorable. In the case of my appeal, Samantha's story, $800 for a Bible? That's hard to believe. Most people can't even process that. That was literally a stopping point for people. In fact, when we got letters and emails and phone calls, that was the number one most referenced thing that people wrote when they sent in their gift, is they just couldn't believe that that's what it could cost for a child to have access to the Bible. So clearly it was unexpected and it was memorable. It's the evidence and support of the challenge and struggles leaves room for others to do more. Again, the only way I can describe it is it takes it from an anecdotal, oh, that's so sad, to wow, this is something that needs to be fixed and I can be a part of it. And then finally, this is a technique we use. In fact, we even when we're with clients, we do this hand motion like we're swimming oddly. It's called tuck and fold. You have to tuck and fold it into the story. So if you go back to that original data point that I shared, that stories are remembered 22 times better than facts alone, when you tuck the data into the story, now the data also becomes memorable. And I've shared Samantha's story. It is amazing how 6 months later, a year later, people will come up to me and they'll say, I still can't believe it costs $800 for a Braille Bible. They remember it because it's something that they remember the story, not just the data. So at StoryFind, we have a process that helps organizations find and shape their stories, to use these practical tools to actually write stories or create video for story or to create podcasts for story, social media content, whatever. This is a proven process with over 20 years of success, transformative success for many organizations. And the process is on the surface very simple. It's 5 steps. First of all, create a master plan. Second, find and select your best stories, or as we like to call it, go on a story hunt. I like to think of it because I love pirates, like you're searching for buried treasure, right? Organize your stories, interview with skill, and then finally, make sure you edit that story for maximum impact. We don't have enough time to cover all of this, but I want to go through a few of these steps that are so critical. First and foremost, master plan. The misconception about storytelling is that it is simply an art, and that is not true. Effective storytelling is equal parts science, strategy, and art. There are both components to this because storytelling is not simply made up. We're not creating false narratives. We're not creating fluff. We're working with purpose. And so you have to be strategic in how you do this. And so to start, first step, what is your goal? What are you trying to do with telling the story? If activity without purpose does not equal accomplishment. So simply telling stories for the sake of telling stories is never going to be effective. It's never going to help you. And it's usually going to upset your CFO because they're thinking this is a waste of money and we're getting no ROI. Well, that's because there's no purpose. So what is your goal? Are you trying to raise money? Are you trying to raise awareness? Are you trying to recruit volunteers? Are you trying to find new partners? Are you working towards a grant? You have to know what your goal is because you should only have one clear goal for telling the story. You could get other benefits, but there has to be one focus. And then the second part of that is once you have your goal, let's say you're trying to raise money, how are you going to measure success? If you're trying to raise money, is it a certain dollar amount? Is it a certain response rate? Is it certain number of new donors? Is it a donor conversion? Is it recruiting lapsed donors? Is it adding 5 new state plans and covering 10 existing estate plans? Whatever that is, you have to define how you will measure success because what happens, what this allows you to do is to go back and review the story. How do you know if it worked or not if you're not actually setting a definition of success? You also can't find the right story if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish. Who is your audience? Again, when I talked about Samantha's story, you notice I referenced how Samantha's parents were sympathetic because I know that most of my audience are going to be older people who are devout Christians. These are most often grandparents, quite frankly. And so I knew that my audience is going to be thinking of their own grandchildren as much as anything else. So I wrote the story in a way that reached that audience. If you're working with Gen Z, different story. If you're working with um, people who aren't faith-based, or if you're working with community activists, there are so many different ways that you have to approach different groups. Do they know you? Do they not know you? Your story is going to have to be different. What is the one big idea? What is the one takeaway that you want people to have? This is so critical. I always ask audiences, if people read or hear your story or watch your story, if they can take away one thing, what is it? And if you can't answer that, or if you have more than one, you don't have an effective story because our brains are typically going to remember one thing. That's it. And then what is the clear path to action they should take? So if you have 15 seconds to hook somebody, at the end, you typically have 15 seconds to get people to act. So if you're asking them to do three things, you've lost it. What is the one path to action that they should take? Going on a story hunt, a lot of people ask, well, how do we find stories? Well, you have to find the storyteller that fits that master plan, right? That's why the master plan is so important. It tells you what story you're actually looking for. Most failures also occur when we try to make the wrong story work. Going back to Samantha's story, I received that story in May. I sat on it till March of the next year. Why? Because I needed it. It was an Easter story. I was making it part of my Easter appeal. If I shared Samantha's story at Christmas, would it have been effective? It would have raised money, but would it have been as effective? Absolutely not. And so you can have incredible stories, but quite frankly, they're not the right story for that particular storytelling mechanism, video, appeal, newsletter, whatever that is. So you have to sometimes hold on to the right stories because you have to find the right fit. And another example of that, by the way, is you can have sometimes the most powerful story, but let's say you're trying to create a video. If your storyteller has no emotion, if they're not engaged, if the audience isn't going to like them, put it in print. I hate to say it that way. But it's better to tell the right story the right way than the right story the wrong way where you just don't get results. And then finally, editing for maximum impact. When you write your story, you have to be able to go back and make sure, does it still fit the master plan? Is there a story arc? Can you identify challenge, struggles, and resolution? Did you hit all aspects of the rhetorical triangle? Did you hit the ethos, the pathos, the logos? And I say with this, by the way, have somebody who wasn't part of the story creation review this. Is there an effective call to action? Do they know how you're asking them to act? Again, you want to be able to ask somebody, what did you take away from this? How am I asking you to act? And if they don't know, you didn't do a good job on the storytelling. And then finally, you want to make sure you're understanding the ethical and trauma informed implications of storytelling. And this is a whole other seminar we're not going to get into, but there's a couple of points I always get asked that I want to address. When you're editing a story, when is it okay, for example, to change identity or change identifiable characteristics? When should we change a name or change a gender? And our answer and response is typically this way. Are you changing information to protect the storyteller, or are you changing the information to mislead the audience? If you're trying to protect the storyteller, it's okay. It's ethical. You have to be able to protect somebody. If you're working where maybe they're in a country where they could be killed for their faith or killed for who they are, of course you need to change that. You have to protect them. If you're changing it because, oh, it would be more compelling if this was a female story or a child story, not an adult story, that's not protection any longer. You're trying to mislead the audience. And so when you edit, you have to be able to address that. So with that, that's the fundamentals. This is just the 30,000 foot view of finding and telling your best stories. I think now it's a great time, Doug. If you want, let's start getting into the workshopping of these
Let's
ideas.
do it. Let's do it. I'm excited for this, Daniel. I really am. And I've prepared not prepared. This is a real story from a ministry that we work with. I'm going to give you the details, and then I'm hoping you can coach me on what I need to do to make this because there's a lot of data in this story. So looking forward to kind of fleshing it out in our time here together. And I think we're going to do it twice. We're going to do it once from my perspective, and then we're going to flip it and we're going to talk about the ministries on the call, how they could use the same story in their context. So here's the details of the story. We received word from a client that we serve. They got notice from a family that a bequest, a legacy gift, was coming their way, valued at $103,000. Then they said, all the contact notes that we have on this particular donor are related to surveys that you've done at Canopy. So for those who on the call who aren't a client of ours, we send a lot of mail and we call them surveys, check-in letters, and the goal is to create a dialogue through the mail. There were 7 records in the client portfolio about contacts. One was for a postcard. I think it was for an invitation to an event. One was something about a capital campaign. And then there were 5 Canopy surveys that were mentioned over 5 different years where that was the only contact. Now, the donor didn't respond to a single one. And the donor never let the ministry know that they were in her estate. So no response, no notification. Gift data on this particular donor. First gift, 1997, $5. Last gift, 2023, $26. Total lifetime giving, $1,116 from 50 total gifts. So it's an average gift amount of $22.36. That legacy gift at $103,000 was 92 times her lifetime giving total. The average, just for context, is about 10x. So it's usually about 10x the lifetime giving. In this case, it was 92x. Very under the radar donor, not on anyone's, assigned, no, not assigned to any giving officer portfolio. So tell me, Dan, what do I do next? Where do I go from here?
Yeah, great question, great story. So I would say, Doug, from a Canopy perspective, first and foremost, let's start with the master plan, right?
Okay.
What is your goal in sharing that story? What are you trying to accomplish in sharing that story?
I think that we're trying to share the potential that legacy gifts offer such that more ministries and clients will or prospective clients will understand that they really think ought to be doing something with legacy gift marketing as well.
Okay, so your goal is to raise awareness of the efficacy of legacy gift marketing. Did I kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
capture what you were thinking?
yeah.
Okay. So how are you going to measure success?
I suppose if we get, I'm just going to say we get 10 prospective nonprofits who express interest in doing more with legacy gift marketing.
Great, right? That's a measurable goal. So you know that after you tell your story, that's what you're going to look back. Did we get 10? Yes or no, right? Easy to measure. What is your target audience? Well, we know that. I'm going to jump in on that one. We know that, right? The nonprofits you work with,
Sure.
but I'm going to ask you to re-summarize. What is your one big idea that you want people to take away? If they take away one thing, what is the one thing they take away from that story?
I'm going to say the potential that legacy gifts provide. I mean, just the tremendous potential to transform your ministry and your fundraising long term. Or see, now I've gotten into 3 things: the sustainability um, that legacy giving provides for the long term benefit of the organization. Did I just give you 3?
You just gave me 3. So you see, this is part of it. If
Okay.
you're not clear, how is your audience going to be clear, right? So, and I'm not picking on you, Doug. I appreciate you going through this exercise, but it's one of those. I would probably, looking back to the story you have in your pocket, I think it maybe a big idea, right? A clearer one big idea is that marketing works even if you don't see the results right away,
Okay. Oh,
right?
okay. All right.
because that's what ultimately, even when you were sharing the details, to me, that is what stood out. That you had this donor, they didn't know about it, there was no communication, never communicated. Look, it worked. It still worked. So I think if we look at that as your one big idea, makes a lot of sense. That's something you want your audience to take away. Would you agree with that? Disagree with that?
It works even if you're saying the marketing works even if the donor doesn't communicate.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sounds, yeah, good. I like it.
So so when you're preparing your story, we're not quite to the story yet even, but we're going through the master plan. How are you going to tell the story? What is the way you're going to do it? Is this an email? Is this a video? How would you want to tell the story?
Let's say it's an email.
Okay, great. Yeah. What is the call to action? What is the one way that people can act in 15 seconds to respond to that one big idea and what you're hoping to accomplish, which is 10 people expressing interest, 10 organizations expressing interest and taking on this? What is your call to action?
Find out how you can grow your legacy pipeline with legacy gift marketing.
Yep. Probably a click here, right?
Click here.
Click
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
to sign up, right? Or click here because even if you say to learn more, that doesn't help you accomplish your goal, right? You express that your specific goal, your measurable is you need 10 people expressing interest. So it's not enough that they learn more. You actually need them to complete something, a form or send an email, something, right? So this is how you even clarify your call to action. You need them to click here and sign up to learn more
Okay.
because you have to be very clear to your audience. What do you actually want them to do? Let's be honest, Doug. Do you really want them to just learn more or do you want them to act, right?
Sure. Right. We wanted to sign up. That's right.
So that's the beauty of the master plan is it's going to help you narrow in on each of these areas. So now that we have the master plan, we already at least have the story. Let's start constructing the skeleton of that story. So what is the challenge of this story?
The challenge, okay, I'm going to make an inference here. The challenge is perhaps that I don't have the time to do legacy gift marketing, or I don't have the donor base to do legacy gift marketing.
Yeah, I think either of those could be really effective challenges. I think a lot of organizations would say, I don't have enough big donors to justify legacy gift planning, right? I'm sure you speak to this better than I can, but I've heard that a lot in my
Yeah.
career. So the challenge is almost legacy legacy giving and legacy giving marketing doesn't apply to us, right? That's kind of the challenge. We don't fit legacy giving. What are the struggles? What were the struggles within that story?
So the donor was unresponsive, so there wasn't a lot of back communication from the donor. Clearly, I mean, just very unengaged from a communication standpoint. They didn't respond to surveys. There was no notification of the gift. Um, and I suppose the challenge was that the donors' gifts were pretty small to begin with.
Three great struggles. And I think most organizations would connect with at least one of those stories, right? Remember, relatable theme? Most organizations have probably experienced one of those three. So those are three incredible struggles when you're building out your story because that's what's relatable. It's a problem. What's the resolution?
So there actually was a gift. We just didn't know about
Yeah,
it.
yes. And it wasn't just that there was a gift. It's 92 times their lifetime giving, right? It's a
Right,
transformative gift.
right.
So that's your story arc. We don't think the challenges, we don't think that you may not, again, from Canopy perspective, you're telling the story to organizations, you may not think that legacy giving applies to you, right? Here's the struggles that we heard within this story. So another organization felt the same way. Here's the challenges and struggles they faced. Look at this resolution and it can apply to you too. Like this isn't if you have somebody who's given a $5 gift, you have the potential for legacy giving, right? Um, because I think most organizations have at least $5 donors. So it really speaks to that idea that this works for you. And it goes back to what we talked, right? The master plan. What is your one big idea? Legacy giving can work for you. So
Awesome.
you're still connecting it to now really quickly, let's lay over
Let's
the
flip it.
rhetorical
Yeah.
triangle.
Oh, okay. All right.
Really quickly, what is the authority? What is the ethos? That top part of the triangle.
That those gifts are out there. The donor was a legacy donor.
Yes. Canopy sent the 5 emails, right?
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the authority to you as the organization.
Okay.
Like
Gotcha.
you sent the emails and the surveys, they got a response. That's the authority. What is the emotional connection? What is the pathos?
That the donor um, loved the organization enough to include him in their will.
Yeah, I, again, you're talking to organizations. It's both donor centric. I think you could even, as you flesh out the story, how did their staff respond? I bet you there was celebration.
Oh
I
yeah.
bet you there were, shouts of joy. That's a
Yeah.
huge gift, right? So that's sometimes the emotional component. And I think you hit it. What were some of the logos, the data points?
And that the 92X,
Yep.
the lifetime giving was very modest.
$1,100. Yeah. Total gift, 103,000. Yeah. Those are your data points. So I think you get it, but you can see how you have now hit every component of the rhetorical triangle. So when you actually sit down to write your email, you have a plan, you have a story arc, and you've hit every part of the triangle. Now it's just fleshing out the actual story.
Okay. Good. Well, let's flip it. So I
Yep.
think we want to talk about this from the perspective of the people on the call. So I'm an organization. This is my story. This was my donor. Walk me through that.
Yeah. So I'm going to literally start. If you're going to share this story, what's your goal in sharing this story?
My goal is that I want other donors to realize that they can do this too, regardless of their wealth capacity.
Great. So is this going back to the goal? I think that's, by the way, that is a perfect one big idea. You already skipped ahead.
Okay. Oh,
Um,
okay. All right.
what is your goal? Is it to get new donor estate plans or simply to raise awareness?
Um, well, but yes, I want new donor estate plans. I
Okay.
mean, whether they report them or not, I just want more people to include my charity in their will, the charity I will.
Okay. So the goal is you're trying to get new charitable gifts through estate planning. That's the goal, right? How are you going to measure that? It's not enough to say, even if we don't know, like you still need to put something on it, right?
Okay. So
What
how
what what goal maybe could you have as an organization?
I have 5 people who tell me they would consider including this organization in their will.
Great. 5. That's reasonable, right? And again, this is going to be organization specific, but for the sake of our exercise, there we go. Five new estate plans or contact to learn more about estate plan. Your audience, I think that one's a little simpler, right? This is going to be your donor audience who already knows you. So we know who the audience is.
Loyal,
Your
faithful
one
donor.
big idea, right? I think that came through so clearly. Estate planning can work for you, even if you don't think you have enough.
Okay.
Um, let's say that this is going to be a direct mail piece, right? So we know the medium. What's the call to action? Let's go to that. That's always a challenge. What is your call to action, Doug? You're
Ooh,
sending them a piece of mail. You're
yeah.
telling this beautiful story. How can they act?
The call to action is they go meet with an attorney, but or they go online and update their will. I mean, that's what I want them to do. That's a big, that often takes many steps for a donor to be able to get to that place. They don't necessarily do that on the first try. Um, does that rule it out? Is that okay? Or do I need something simpler?
I think you need something simpler. Again, if you have 15 seconds to get people to act, how can you get them to act, to take a step in 15 seconds?
Click this link to learn more.
There we go. If it's an email, click the link. If it's a direct mail, maybe it's return a reply device, right? Fill this out, return it, and we'll contact you to help guide you through the process.
Okay.
And that's easy to measure, right? That allows you to go back and measure, did you get 5 people to respond? So there has to be something that allows people to act now that you can track. That's how you measure success. So looking at the story arc, and I don't want to belabor this point, but again, the challenge, right? You have a different audience, but what is the challenge?
Um, the challenge is that people don't think they have the ability or the capacity to make a gift in their will.
Yes, we hear this all the time, right? I don't give enough. I don't have enough money to make an estate gift. I don't give enough, or my donors don't give enough. So to the donor, yeah, that's the challenge. What are the struggles? What are the struggles that are going to be communicated through this story?
Um, okay, see, now I went to the donor struggle. I thought the struggle would be that it's hard, it's expensive, or it's complicated to update my will.
Yes, perfect. Those are struggles. Those are absolutely the struggles. We don't know how. It's too scary. We don't have enough money. It's too expensive. Those absolutely can be conveyed through that story. What is the resolution? And there's probably two.
That we can help you with some of those struggles, and make it easier for you, or that you request information to learn more.
I think those are still more organization. What's a donor-centric resolution? Go back to your one big idea.
That I can do that. The donors have an awareness that they can do this.
Yes. A, I think the first resolution is you can do this. And B, there's a more subtle resolution, but you can have a transformative impact about a ministry you
Ah,
care about.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
It's not enough to just say you can do this, but you want to put in the donor's minds that they can have an impact that they're not even considering yet. Because again, think about it. $1,100 lifetime donor, $100,000 estate gift, that's transformative.
Yeah.
So you could see, I mean, right there, I know we need to get to Q&A, but I think that at least covers the story arc and
Yeah.
hopefully demonstrates to organizations this is how you start framing your stories for your audiences.
Good. Good. I love it. And obviously, I have a lot to learn. I appreciate you walking me through so patiently. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about some questions that I heard from folks as they were registering here. Um,
Right.
talk a little bit about, I'm really curious because you mentioned briefly trauma-informed storytelling. How do you do this well? Because I do think there's a number of folks on the call today who are like, all right, some of the stories we tell are pretty sensitive. What should we be aware of when we're doing this?
Absolutely. So trauma-informed storytelling, first and foremost, begins with informed consent. And for organizations, what that means is the person whose story you're collecting will always have to own their story. They have to know how their story is going to be used. They have to know how the story is being presented. They have to be able to, at any point, say, I don't want my story shared, and you have to honor that. And then another component of that, are you helping them understand potential unintended consequences of the story being shared? Are they aware of if they're telling a really hard story of homeless? Do their coworkers know that they were homeless? Does their family know that this was an issue? Or if you're telling a donor story, and I've seen this happen, the donor's family didn't know that they had that much money. It created issues. Well, wait a second. What do you mean you made $1 million gift? I need help. Right. So part of even trauma informed is making sure are they aware of what could happen with their story being shared. And then ultimately, part of trauma informed is that when you're interviewing a person, are you making sure they're not re-traumatized in sharing their story? Are you looking for signs of re-traumatization? And if you see those signs, are you stopping it? Are you now stepping in to help protect that storyteller? So it's making sure that when they tell their story, it is empowering, not exploitative.
Does this, maybe you've touched on this, but I think we talked earlier about when I was growing up, it was the curse of being on the cover of Sports Illustrated. You talked about the curse of being on the cover of the Madden video game. But, story, my face is on a billboard around town and I'm the picture of success, and now suddenly I've fallen off the wagon, or I've relapsed, or things aren't going well for me again. Is how do we can we prevent that? How do we walk with donors or people through those stories?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points to that. First of all, it's the preparation, right? Walking them through ahead of time. This is how your story is going to be shared. Are you prepared for spotlight to be shown on you? Then there's also aftercare, and this is a big part of ethical storytelling. Once you collect a story from somebody, once you tell that story, it is your duty as an organization to follow up with them afterwards. Are they doing okay? Do they have support? Has something happened that nobody was expecting? Telling people how their story has impacted others, because that again it creates empowerment, not exploitation. So usually can things happen, of course, but usually a way to prevent that is by the aftercare. It's by good pre-care and aftercare of the storyteller.
Okay, good. How about a number of registrants ask this question too: composite stories versus real stories. I think the temptation is either that I have a donor who won't, I have a hard time finding donors willing to share. So maybe if I write a composite story, that's a way around that. Any insight onto, is one more effective than the other? Is one more truthful than another? How do you think about that?
Yeah. Again, I think it goes back to the question I asked. Are you doing it to protect a storyteller or are you doing it to manipulate? Um, when I worked with the Lutheran Braille workers, photos was a big issue. People who are blind sometimes can be very sensitive about how they appear in photos or video. So we would use a stock image. It wasn't to mislead, it was simply to protect them. Uh, in terms of composite, if you're doing it because they're at risk or they're in a security, of course a composite is okay. If you're building a composite simply because you just don't want to go find the right story or work with the storyteller to get their permission, I think at that point you're starting to get a little bit into misleading. There's a lot of nuance, but usually a way to get people comfortable, again, is helping them own their story through the process, know how it's going to be used. They're a lot more willing to give their permission at that point.
Any tips on how to find stories? I know that's a my newsletter's due in 2 days. What do I do? I need a story.
That's why you start building your master plan much sooner, because then you now have something to go out into your organization and say, folks, this is the type of story we're looking for. Does anybody know a story that could align with this? And storytelling is really a responsibility of everybody in the organization. They may not have to write the story, but you're asking them to help find the stories. But to that point, Doug, if I was to ask you right now, hey, tell me a story of your childhood, that's hard, right? Because you're probably thinking, well, what part of my childhood? What do you
Right.
want to know? What do you want me to tell you? But if I were to say, Doug, I want you to tell me a story of a time in your childhood where somebody showed you what generosity means. And I'm seeing your face. I bet you probably had one or maybe even two that literally popped into your head, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what happens oftentimes when organizations struggle to find stories is because all they're asking for is, hey, people, give me a story. Well, who knows what that means? But if you say, hey, people, we need a story that speaks to this, it's a lot easier. Those guidelines actually help improve creativity, not restrict it.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, this has been so much fun. It's been fun for me. I trust it's been fun for our listeners. I really enjoy just the workshopping. It's not as I thought this would be easy. It's fun, but there's some thinking and some preparation that goes into it. So I appreciate you taking your time to share with us your wisdom, your insights, as we both learned about stories and work through stories together. So I'd like to close our time at Canopy. Our heart really it's to see ministries like yours deepen relationships so that people's lives can be healed and transformed. We like to say for many of our clients, through the power of the good news that Jesus has come, has risen, and is coming again to make all things new. But we also use the same relational, values based approach with nonprofits doing some great work just without a faith forward approach. But for our faith forward clients today who are on the call, and all those who want to be blessed with the good news, I'd like to close our time with a blessing here as we go. So, invite you to join me as we receive this blessing. Saving God, you are restoring us to life. You have brought us back again into your love through Jesus. Continue to heal us. Continue to heal our neighborhoods and our cities, our nation, and our world as we go to live and work and play. Amen. Thanks so much for
Amen.
joining us today, friends. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Stay in touch. Goodbye.